So, I was talking before about this business, no right or wrong way, different things you can do. So this is just a bit of psychobabble that I'll throw in here. Emotion focused are things we do to manage our feelings. So when we're talking about our cancer experience to other people, that's emotion focused because we're getting it out, we're getting the emotions out. When we cry, that's actually emotion focused coping, it's managing feelings. Anything we do that just relieves that sense of stress, that's emotion focused. And problem focused are solving problems and fixing it, which is typically more of a masculine way of approaching, and women tend to be a bit more emotion focused, but of course there are differences. I'm actually a big problem focused coper, so I break all the stereotypes. My daughter knows that, hence her going, where was your thinking? Because I go, I've got a problem, let's make a plan. But you can't always make a plan, and sometimes just dealing with the feelings and talking about it and letting that come out is actually the best thing to do. So you need a balance of both, I guess, is the message. Oops. Okay, so just let me go back a bit. So this just reinforces what I was saying before. Use a variety of coping strategies. Different situations require different tools from your toolbox. Be flexible and experiment. Don't be afraid to try a new thing and say, I'll give that a go, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. What have I lost? I'll have another, I might try it again, or I might try something else. And it's better to have a range of things and have a balanced approach. When I was talking about imagining you're somewhere else is not always a good strategy. Very sensitive. So this gets back to what I was talking about with, I had the diagram up there which had the thoughts box. The thoughts are pretty important. As I was saying earlier, when you can't sleep at night and you're tossing and turning, it's thoughts usually that are there. And sometimes we don't notice what our thoughts are doing to us because they're often automatic. It's an automatic thing. We have patterns of thinking about stuff that we develop over the years, and those patterns just kick in and we don't even know it. And often those patterns of thoughts are overly pessimistic, overestimate your problems or your degree of responsibility, and they're often not based on evidence. So it can be where you've got a test result coming up and you don't even know what the test result is, but already in your head, you've gone down the track of it's bad, the PSA is going to be up, awful things are going to happen, and you're trying to plan for that, where you don't even know what's happened yet. It's a natural thing, a natural state of worry, but it increases your level of distress. It can increase your level of distress, so it's not so helpful. So the idea behind cognitive behavioural approaches is to become aware of when you're thinking about things in a way that's unhelpful to you, and to try and change that thinking so that it's a bit more helpful, to help yourself. So to challenge those negative thoughts, and by asking questions like, well, hang on, do I know this is going to happen? Is this definitely going to happen? What's the evidence that this is true? Am I catastrophizing? Am I giving myself scare tactics? What am I doing? And would it be better for me to think in a different way? So some common things that people do in the case of cancer is underestimating how long it takes to get back to normal. So setting unrealistic goals for yourself and then feeling bad when you don't meet them. Catastrophizing about what might go wrong. So thinking the worst. Getting back to former levels of activity too quickly, and then blaming yourself and not recognising or praising yourself for the gains that they have made. So when you're doing a really good job of managing the situation you're in, recognising that, go, oh, I did that really well, feel a bit better. That conversation we had about the situation we're in, that went really well. We're doing a good job of this, of coping with this. This is an example of common thinking errors, so scare tactics. I know that if I have treatment, I'll definitely get all the worst side effects I've ever heard about. So expecting the worst, and you're going through it in your head before you're even there. You might get some side effects, you might not. There is no value to you in imagining the worst and living through it in your head and making yourself anxious. Catastrophizing. Everything will fall apart if I can't do everything around the house exactly the way I want to do. So setting yourself unrealistic expectations and then catastrophizing that it is a disaster if I don't get to do these things. Self-blame or guilt. So if you're feeling bad, being nasty to yourself. Going, oh, if I were a strong person, I wouldn't be feeling this way, and giving yourself a bad time. And a good way to stop a lot of this is to think, what would my best friend say? If I were my best friend, what would I say to myself? and try and become your own best friend in everything. And ask yourself that question when you're doing something. Would my best friend think this was a good idea for me to do this? And then all or nothing thinking, if my sex life can't be just the same as it was before, then there's no use trying. So setting yourself a standard that you've got a chance of failing, and then it's all a disaster. When we were setting up our couple study, something that we worked very hard on was to say that the goal of the intervention, and we were working with a Texan sex therapist, how about that? She's a fabulous person, very famous, and they were very focused on the outcome had to be having sex. And I said to her, no, we're not going to do that. What we want is people to be comfortable with whatever sex they're having or not having. So we don't want people to feel like they have to do certain things, but we want them to be comfortable with what they're doing. And personally, I think that's a good way of looking at it for yourself, rather than saying it has to be perfect, it has to be exactly the same. Accept that it can be different, and then work with being comfortable with where you're at, as comfortable as you can be. So this is the trick behind this is you've got to work out if you are doing negative automatic thoughts. So the way to do that is if you might find in certain circumstances you're feeling more anxious, just jot down on a piece of paper what's going on in your head. Often just the writing down of negative thoughts can be really helpful. It helps express them, and sometimes you can just look at them on paper and go, well, that's not helpful. I'm going to change the way I think about that. Notice if there's any thoughts that recur. There might be a particular issue that's more important to you. And then test your thoughts to see if they're worth keeping. So what's the evidence that this is true? Is this realistic and rational? And more importantly, is it helpful? Yes, it might or might not happen, but is it helpful for me to be focusing on this, or should I focus on something else? And then the idea behind this is that try and think of a way that you can think about the situation that's more helpful to you. So it can't be silly. There's no point saying, that's okay, tomorrow I'm winning lotto and then I'm jetting off to the Bahamas and my life will be perfect. That's not going to be helpful. But if you can think about, well, okay, might be something along the lines of this might happen or that might happen, but in either event, this is the situation. I mean, I've got good family around me, blah, 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 blah. Just something that's a way of reminding yourself that it's really okay and telling yourself that thought. Think of yourself as your own coach, your own best friend. Now, there is a different approach to, this is the challenging and replacing the negative thought approach. There is a different one that we're starting to do some work on in Queensland, and it's quite popular around different spots, called Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which is more Buddhist and meditation-based. And some of you are nodding, so you might have heard of it. And the idea behind that, it's cognitive behavioural in focus, but it's not saying change the thought. It's saying recognise when the thought is there and just try and sit with it without being affected by it. So the idea is you learn meditation-based techniques that help you to not overly react to negative thoughts that recur. And I really like that approach myself as well, and I think it's a good one. So I guess I'm just sort of throwing at you different things you can do, because different things suit different people. Mindfulness-based kind of Buddhist meditation type approaches, some people really like that and others prefer this sort of standard CBT approach. There are different stress management strategies you can use, and they won't suit everybody, but know that they're there in case. A lot of it you can get it out of self-help books and things like that, and you can teach it to yourself, or you can go and see a psychologist or practitioner to get you some help. There's some examples of helpful thoughts if you're going to do the challenging and replacing. So I can't worry about something that's not happened, I'm just going to take a day at a time. Acknowledging that this is frustrating but it's not a disaster. Reducing self-blame, it's normal to feel upset, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a normal reaction to this experience. And focus on your goals. Now, how are we going for time, David? We're fine? Okay, so I won't read each of these in turn, but I think relaxation strategies are really good things. You know, we had the circle up there and there was physical reactions that, you know, the noradrenaline and adrenaline pumps out of your adrenal glands, you're getting ready to fight that tiger or run away from it, and it's all steaming around in your body. A lot of relaxation strategies are really simple and can be done in challenging situations. So if I'm giving a talk and I'm really nervous, I do it before I get up and give a talk. Usually when I'm talking to urologists, they're the scariest people I present to because they're a really tough audience. It's a good thing, but they're a tough audience. So I'm a big believer in slow and controlled deep breathing where you do counting. And a lot of Actually, the Cancer Council on their website, you can download a CD that has download an audio file, an MP3 file that has that, and I'm sure the Cancer Council here would have the same sort of things. If you teach yourself how to do controlled breathing and you start noticing when you're feeling more stressed, you can kick it in, and you can do that in a doctor's waiting room while you're waiting to see the doctor. You can do it before a procedure, and it really does work, because the controlled and slow breathing just slows your physical response down. There are more complicated relaxation strategies that involve progressive relaxation, you know, start your toes, all this business, and I've never been much chop at those, but if you can practice those and get good at them, people say that they're really helpful. And then there's the more Buddhist approach, those types of meditation approaches, which we run these groups doing mindfulness-based meditation in Queensland, and we get fantastic feedback from people. And we ran some specifically for men with prostate cancer because we didn't know whether we could get blokes to do it, but we could. The blokes all turned up, and we got lovely letters and feedback from them that they thought it was helpful. So that's just things I've been talking about there. It's important to remember that if you haven't done relaxation exercises before, they are a skill, like learning to ride a bike. So you can't just click it on, you've got to practice them, and it can be something that you can set yourself as a goal. If you've been feeling a bit nervy or jittery and you just want to calm down a little bit, you could learn some of these and practice them every night before you go to bed. They don't like you to do it in bed because they say you'll fall asleep, but that's never bothered me. But you can ignore all of that and just do nothing and struggle on through, and you'll get by.